My name is Daniel Holt. I manage logistics for a mid-size freight company. The kind of job that sounds more interesting than it is, which means I spend most of my working hours staring at spreadsheets and answering emails that could have been a phone call. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building that smells faintly of someone else's cooking after 7 p.m. and has a radiator that knocks 3 times before it turns on, like it's asking permission. Norah Callahan is my younger sister's closest friend. She's 29, a landscape architect who works from home 3 days a week and spends the other 2 commuting to a firm downtown. She has brown hair she keeps in a loose knot most mornings, and a coffee mug that says, "Not yet," in large block letters, which I came to understand was not commentary on the coffee, but on the general state of everything before 9 a.m. I'd known her for years, the way you know, someone who exists in the background of your life. Holidays. The occasional Sunday when my sister brought her along. A familiar face that had never quite crossed the distance into something more defined. She had a small succulent on her desk at home that she'd named Gerald, according to my sister, who told me this once without context. I found this quietly impressive. Then my aunt called on a Thursday evening with what she described as wonderful news. She was hosting a dinner the following Saturday, my grandmother's 80th birthday. Immediate family, which in my family means 26 people. A seating arrangement that someone always disputes, and the expectation that I would arrive with a date. Not a suggestion, not a preference. My Aunt Rosaria's voice had that particular note in it that indicated this was an infrastructure requirement. She had, she informed me, already told my grandmother that Daniel was bringing someone. My grandmother, who was 80 and had earned opinions, had been very pleased. My aunt hoped I understood what that meant. I understood completely. The problem was that the last person I'd been seeing had ended things in January, politely and correctly, and I had not replaced her, because I had been busy with freight logistics and poor decision-making around my personal life. It was currently March. I had 8 days. I sat with this problem for 2 days before I did anything about it. That's my natural timeline for problems I don't like. On the 3rd day, I called my sister. She listened. She said, without hesitating, "Call Norah." I said I couldn't ask Norah to do that. She said, "She likes you more than you think. Just call her." Then she hung up. I texted Norah that evening, told her the situation in what I hoped was a measured way. She called me back in 4 minutes. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend at your grandmother's birthday dinner?" "Wife," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Your aunt may have embellished slightly." "Slightly," I said. Another pause. Then, "What does it pay?" I told her my aunt makes a lasagna that is genuinely life-changing. She said, "And dessert?" "Tiramisu, from scratch." "Fine," she said. "But I want to know your grandmother's name, how long we've supposedly been together, and whether there are any cousins I need to be warned about in advance." I told her there were 2. She asked specific questions about both of them. I answered honestly. And that was how my sister's best friend agreed to be my wife for one dinner. We planned it the way you plan a cover story when you have a week and only one rehearsal. I told her about my family the way you might brief someone before a deposition. Useful facts, likely questions, people to watch. My grandmother Maria had been a florist for 40 years and still spoke about flowers the way other people speak about politics, with conviction and heat. She would ask Norah how we met. We decided on a bookshop, specific enough to be convincing. We had both been in bookshops. She said the name first. I said I was blocking the shelf she needed. We practiced it twice. It didn't sound natural until the third time. By the fourth, it sounded like something that had actually happened. Saturday arrived colder than March had any right to be. Norah met me outside the restaurant where we'd agreed to go over final details. She was in a dark green dress I had never seen before, her hair down, wearing small gold earrings that caught the early evening light. She had her coat over one arm and was checking her phone with the focused look of a person consulting a mission briefing. She looked up. Ready. We drove 20 minutes to my aunt's house, a large Victorian in a neighborhood where parking is always a small war. We found a space 2 blocks down and walked, and somewhere in those 2 blocks, she tucked her arm through mine in the natural, practiced way of someone who had decided a thing and committed to it. Her coat sleeve against my jacket, her shoulder near mine. She said quietly, "What are the cousins' names again?" "Marco and Stella," I said. "Marco asks too many questions. Stella watches. Which one should I watch?" "Marco." "Got it. That is not a romantic story. That is 2 people walking in the cold, reviewing operational details. I know that. I'm telling you this because what happened next had nothing to do with the walk, and everything to do with a dinner table. My aunt's house was warm and loud, and smelled of garlic and red wine, and something baking in the back that I knew from 30 years of dinners was the tiramisu. My grandmother was already seated at the head of the table in her good cardigan, sharp-eyed and small, and entirely aware of everything happening in any room she occupied. She looked at Norah the way you look at something you have been told about and are now measuring against your expectation. "This is the one," she said to me. "This is Norah," I said. My grandmother took Norah's hand in both of hers and held it for a moment, the way she does instead of shaking. She said something in Italian, then in English. "You have good hands. Florists can always tell." Norah said, "Daniel told me about your shop. I heard you kept it for 40 years. My grandmother looked at her. 41. "Who counts the last year separately?" "The people who know the difference," Norah said. My grandmother laughed, the short, genuine kind. She kept Norah's hand an extra second before releasing it and said, "Sit. Sit near me. I want to hear the bookshop story." We sat. Norah told the bookshop story. She told it with a detail we hadn't rehearsed. Something about the specific section, poetry, and the reason she was there, which she invented cleanly and without hesitation. I watched my grandmother listen with the expression she reserves for things she finds actually interesting. Marco asked 3 pointed questions in the first 20 minutes. Norah answered all 3 calmly, with the particular quality of someone who is not performing calm, but is actually calm. And Marco subsided. Across the table, my cousin Stella was watching me with a small, curious look. I didn't examine it too carefully. What I did not expect, and this is the part I've returned to many times since, was how easy it was. Not easy in the way of pretending. Easy in the way of something that didn't require effort. She passed me things before I asked for them. She laughed at the right moments and not at the wrong ones, which is harder than it sounds in my family. When my Uncle Enzo told a story about a boat that went badly for 20 minutes, she caught my eye across the table with the faintest expression, and I had to look away to keep my face. When my grandmother told the story about the white chrysanthemums at her wedding, Norah leaned slightly forward, with the attention of someone who actually wanted to know how it ended. My grandmother noticed. She notices everything. At some point during the second hour, without my having planned it or decided anything, I had my hand on the back of Nora's chair, not touching her, just there. The way you put your hand somewhere when you've forgotten you're allowed to be somewhere. She didn't move the chair. After dinner, my grandmother pulled me aside in the kitchen, a family tradition that functions as a private audience, and looked at me the way she has looked at me since I was 7 years old, like she has always known more than I've told her. "She's not pretending," my grandmother said. "What?" That girl was listening. She handed me a dish towel. Her method of indicating the subject is now closed, and I should make myself useful. "Don't be slow, Daniel. Slow is fine for work. Not for this." I dried plates for 4 minutes thinking about that. On the drive home, we were both quiet for a while. The city moved past the windows. The heater in my car makes a small sound when it cycles on, and it cycled on twice before either of us said anything. Norah said, "Your grandmother is extraordinary." "She is," I said. "She told me the chrysanthemum story isn't the real story." "It isn't. It's longer, and involves a misunderstanding about a train and a flower order that arrived wrong, and my grandfather, who had not been a sentimental man about most things, but apparently had been about this one." Norah listened the whole way through without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "That's a better story." "Yes," I said. "It is." We parked. We walked upstairs. We went inside, and the apartment, my apartment, where she'd stood in my kitchen once or twice before, where my sister had brought her over on holidays, was quiet. She set her coat over the back of the kitchen chair and stood there for a moment, with her hand still resting on it. She wasn't looking at anything specific. The small gold earrings caught the light once. Then she said, without turning around, "Why does this feel real? What would you have done if someone you'd always kept at a comfortable distance suddenly asked why the evening felt real, and you didn't have an easy answer? Have you ever had someone in your life who was already yours before you understood what that meant? Tell me in the comments if this one stayed with you. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.